3 decades ago, during the Great War against the demons, the Minger family played a decisive role in leading the Allied forces to victory. The triumph came at a devastating cost. Nearly the entire family perished, leaving only 2 survivors, 8-year-old Elric Mervinger and his sister. In the aftermath, those who once admired the Mingers abandoned the orphan children. Experiencing such betrayal early in life, Elric resolved to become a powerful wizard. But fate dealt him a harsher blow. He was diagnosed with a rare disorder called mana vascularity, rendering him incapable of wielding magic and making him a subject of ridicule. Years of desperate attempts to find a cure brought no success. Eventually, Elric heard of a dragon, believed to be his only hope for recovery and for restoring the Minger legacy. Yet, upon finding it, he discovered the creature was already dead. In its place stood a shadowy figure, a horned man wearing a chilling smile. The figure saw Elric as a perfect vessel and offered him a pact: merge with him, destroy the world, and create a new one together. A surge of dark energy began to engulf Elric. Only then did he realize this had been a trap laid by the Dark Prince from the start. If he had known the truth, he would never have sought the dragon. Even so, on the verge of losing himself, Elric vowed not to give in so easily. Not long after, doctors confirmed there was no cure for his mana vascularity and that he would never be able to perform magic. While at Udon Academy, he called his sister to update her. She anxiously asked what the doctors had said, and though he knew the truth, Elric reassured her that he would recover soon. Still worried, she pressed him, but he quickly ended the call, wondering how he would tell her he might have to return home. Later, he went to the results board. His theory scores were exceptional, but he had failed the practical magic exams again for the 4th time, putting him on the brink of expulsion. Despite his intellect and sharp ability to sense and analyze mana, his condition kept him from performing magic. A teacher advised him to consider becoming a professor, but that path would not restore his family's honor. His grandfather, Don Minger, celebrated as the Wizard of the Stars, had been a hero in the Demon War and the founder of the very academy Elric now attended. Being expelled from the academy would feel as shameful as personally tarnishing his family's honor. At that moment, Elric overheard 2 first-year students whispering about him. He walked over, confronting them and warning that he would report them to their teaching assistant, Sean. Startled, the freshman quickly left. Later, while absorbed in a book, searching for a possible cure to his condition, Elric was suddenly struck across the face. Turning, he saw Sean, visibly annoyed that Elric had used his name to intimidate others. Sean Nesta belonged to the esteemed Nesta family, one of the 6 great houses that, after the fall of the Mingers, formed the Hexacle, which now governed the Turium. Despite his status, Sean was Elric's only true friend and a constant source of support. As they sat together, Sean handed Elric a document detailing the Diamond Dragon exploration plan. He suggested Elric join the expedition, explaining that a newly discovered proto-dragon believed to be linked to the origin of magic had been located. Elric's eyes lit up, snatching the paper in disbelief. The thought of such a creature existing made him certain there had to be a cure for his ailment somewhere. Sean, pleased with himself, joked about being such a great friend, but Elric's mind was elsewhere. The problem was that any discovery from this expedition would legally belong to the Academy's dean. Suddenly, Elric slapped the map on the table and began laughing with manic excitement. Pointing to it, he declared that the supposed dragon's den was not in the marked location. Sean quickly checked their surroundings to ensure no one had overheard, then advised Elric to be careful opposing the professors who were involved in the expedition could cause serious trouble. Still, he couldn't deny Elric was probably correct. With a warning to keep quiet and uphold proper decorum, especially given his own family's prominence, Sean used magic to draw a circle around the map for closer examination. Together, they spotted a fissure at the meeting point of 2 tectonic plates from which an immense flow of mana was emerging. Elric estimated it to be around 100 years old, and fitting the known traits of a dragon's den. He then recalled the monastery's 3 guiding principles, which Sean hesitantly recited: from high to low, from wide to narrow, from hot to cold. Following these rules, Elric could track the fissure with ease. However, Sean pointed out a major obstacle. There was a stream of superheated groundwater in the area that disrupted mana accumulation, making it an unlikely habitat for dragons. His gaze shifted to Mount Akron, which was actively spewing lava. That was when Elric realized the hot groundwater from the volcano flowed across the entire continent. Snapping back to the moment, Sean, both confused and frustrated, struggled to accept Elric's claim. After all, a dragon's magic signature had already been detected in that region. Elric, however, smiled calmly and clarified that he had never said there was no den. Instead, he pointed out its true location, the Carrigal Cave. Later, Sean made his way toward the dean's office, torn between speaking up and staying silent. If he reported what Elric had said, it could lead to his friend's expulsion, but it was also possible Elric was right. As he hesitated in the hallway, a faint sound drew his attention to the training room. Inside, he saw Elric concentrating with all his might, desperately trying to control his mana, a struggle born from his determination to restore the Mervinger family's lost honor. Watching him, Sean realized this might be Elric's only real chance to find a cure for his condition. Resolute, he turned and entered the dean's office. When the dean heard Sean's claim, his pride took an immediate hit. The thought that his elite research team could be mistaken was an insult he couldn't easily stomach. Sean tried to reason with him, but the dean's anger flared. He warned Sean that, regardless of the Nesta family's influence, there would be consequences for challenging him. As a seven-circle wizard, the dean released a heavy wave of mana, his presence filling the room like a storm. Before tensions could escalate further, the door burst open and Elric stepped in, bowing respectfully. The dean wasted no time, accusing him of putting Sean up to this. Elric admitted it openly. The dean said he appreciated the insight, but dismissed it as nothing more than an unsubstantiated hunch. Elric countered with a faint smile, saying his reasoning was pure common sense, so simple even a child could follow it. Sean, standing nearby, could only cry inwardly at his friend's audacity, wondering why he would provoke the dean like this. The dean, equally sharp-tongued, fired back, calling Elric a failure who couldn't even focus his mana. Then, with cold disdain, he added that some people get lucky in life while others are worthless and unaware of their place, his gaze fixed squarely on Elric.
Even so, the dean couldn't completely disregard him. Instead, he proposed a wager. Curious, Elric asked for details. The dean explained, Elric would have full authority to recruit an expedition team and receive any budget he required. But if he failed, the dean wanted the Mervinger family's most precious heirloom. Later, as the carriage moved steadily down the road, Sean finally snapped, scolding Elric for accepting such reckless terms. Elric sat calmly, turning the pages of his book with an almost lazy detachment. Irritated beyond measure, Sean snatched the book away and shouted that losing would mean parting with the Mervinger family's priceless artifact, the Grand Collar of Wizardry, a relic the dean had coveted for years. Yet Elric's serene smile never faltered. The more unbothered he looked, the angrier Sean became, especially knowing that if Elric failed, he too would face ruin. Unable to hold back, Sean demanded to know his friend's real plan. Finally, Elric straightened up, his eyes gleaming. He revealed that he hadn't accepted the wager to remain at the academy. His motive was far bolder. If the dean wanted the Mervinger treasure, then he had better be prepared to hand over his own position as dean. At that, Sean's chest tightened with unease. He remembered that beyond being called the shame of the Mervinger family, Elric had earned another infamous name, the Mad Dog of the Mervingers. Elric's lips curved into a chilling smile, the kind that made Sean's stomach knot. His mind flashed back to 7 years earlier, when they had first entered the academy. Elric had been just 15 then, surrounded by peers already practicing mana with ease. Because of his illness, he lagged far behind, becoming the subject of murmurs and doubt. Whispers questioned whether he was truly a Mervinger at all. Some even mocked that he must have been adopted. Sean pitied him, yes, but he pitied Elric's tormentors more. The reason was simple. Elric always made sure those who provoked him paid dearly. Not long after, Elric was appointed to Udon Academy's disciplinary committee. When asked about his unflinching punishments, he would simply shrug and say he was applying the Empire's law. Eventually, his heavy-handed approach earned him a suspension. According to the Academy's rules, all students were equals, but after that incident, no one dared lay a finger on him again. Back in the present, Sean's attention shifted to the book in Elric's hands, and his eyes widened. It was a banned text, openly displayed. His temper flared as he demanded to know what Elric was thinking. Elric admitted, a hint of nervousness in his voice, that being caught could mean execution. Still, Sean pressed him for an answer. Why Tiger King's body fortification? Elric's reply was almost childlike in its simplicity. He believed the technique might hold the key to curing his condition. In ancient times, the Tiger King had led the Theanthropes in an invasion of the Empire. His body fortification rendered him nearly unbeatable, and it took the Empire's full force to drive the Theanthropes beyond its borders. A massive wall was built to keep them out, and the Tiger King eventually lost the ability to use his fortification. But didn't the scholars fail to restore it? Sean interrupted. Elric shook his head. They had succeeded. Now his challenge was finding a way to adapt the technique to his own body. Sean could hardly believe such a thing was possible, but in the end, he chose to trust his friend. Just then, the carriage lurched to a halt. Both men stepped outside, alert and ready, to find Liburn and his party waiting. Sean instinctively positioned himself in front of Elric, prepared for trouble, but Liburn quickly explained that the Dean had sent them as support. Elric was skeptical. He didn't need help, especially not from Dean Veru. Leaning closer, Sean whispered that some members of Liburn's group were concealing their true power, exactly the sort of underhanded move the greedy Dean was known for. But Elric was already one step ahead. Earlier, back at the academy, Veru had realized something that chilled him to the bone. Elric had taken Genna's breath and the sky armor. Genna's breath was a fearsome artifact, its ever-burning sulfur capable of reducing anything to ash. The sky armor, a legendary relic, offered unmatched protection against both elemental spells and physical strikes. The thought of entrusting 2 4-star treasures to the mad dog of the Mingers sent Veru into a rage. He couldn't allow anyone to discover what had happened. Yet, an unsettling thought crept in. What if Elric truly managed to locate the dragon's den? Veru muttered under his breath, eyes narrowing. Elric was still a Minger after all. To conceal his own oversight, Veru quietly dismissed several of his researchers. After all, how could a mere student uncover what seasoned scholars had overlooked? Forcing down his unease, he curved his lips into a sinister smile. Soon, thanks to Elric's reckless wager, the grand collar of wizardry would be his. And with that treasure, the seat of minister would no longer be out of reach. The hunger for power glimmered sharply in Veru's gaze. Yes, Elric had won the bet, but that victory meant nothing if he failed to return alive. Deep inside the cave system, Elric finished decoding a portion of the ancient script. Using that information, Sean traced the faint mana lingering in the air. Then, unleashing an overwhelming burst of his own power, Sean locked onto the exact position of the hidden den. In that moment, it became clear to everyone present, Elric had been right from the very beginning. Without hesitation, Elric barked for them to move, before the beam of light marking the location disappeared. Sean reacted instantly, gripping Elric by the waist and surging forward at blinding speed, leaving the others far behind. By the time the rest caught up, they were met with an unexpected sight, or rather, a lack of one. There was no cave, no visible den, just a barren stretch of open ground. Dragons, they knew, rarely chose such exposed places, and confusion rippled through the group. Liburn stepped forward, smirking at what he thought would be his perfect moment to ridicule Elric. But before he could speak, Elric told Sean to blast the ground. Without hesitation, Sean unleashed a devastating strike, shattering the earth and opening a massive pit. Gasps erupted as a concealed cavern was revealed below. From its depths, a dense wave of mana surged upward, so strong it took their breath away. "It's just a mana release," Elric reassured, urging everyone to stay calm as they prepared to descend. The group followed him down, the air growing sharper and colder with each step. Even with Sean's magic radiating warmth, the icy bite lingered. Then, abruptly, Elric raised a hand for silence. Something far beyond the chill of the cave had just brushed against his senses. Deeper inside, hidden in the darkness, A chained creature with a single glowing eye quivered in anticipation. It could feel the presence of an intruder, and its excitement was palpable. Back at the front, Sean and Elric arrived before a towering stone gate, the true entrance to the dragon's den. Excitement buzzed among the team, and debate broke out over whether to force the door or attempt to unlock it with magic. Elric immediately stopped them, warning that the door was bound by a dragon's enchantment that reckless contact could trigger lethal consequences. Meanwhile, Liburn had wandered off to a golden ornate handle embedded in the wall. Driven by curiosity, he reached out and grasped it. Elric spotted the movement and shouted for him to stop, but the warning came too late. The gate began to shudder violently, the sound echoing like thunder through the cavern. Elric's eyes widened. This wasn't just a barrier, it was a trap. Reacting instantly, Sean raised a powerful mana shield around the group. "Decode it now," he urged. The others grew tense, fear gnawing at them. None of them wanted to die in a remote, isolated den. But Elric's expression stayed unwavering. "This isn't just a trap," he said quietly. "It's a test." The answer, he was certain, was hidden right in front of them. All he had to do was trust his instincts, just as he always had. The only question now was whether he could decipher it in time. Elric finally cracks the inscription. He tells everyone to hold it together. If his guess is right, this might save them. Gripping the golden handle, he chants desperately, and somehow it works. The rumbling stops. The nightmare is over. Sean, completely drained, collapses to the ground. Elric rushes to him, but Sean insists he's fine. The group checks on each other, and even Sean admits Elric did an impressive job, a rare compliment that makes Elric a little smug. But suddenly, a man is struck by a bolt of magic. Round 2 begins. Sean quickly throws up another barrier, yelling at Elric to work faster. That's when Elric realizes something shocking. This isn't just any spell work. It's Dragon Tongue, the origin of all magic. Racing to the gate, Elric hears Sean shouting that he can't hold out much longer. Just in time, Elric hurls the sky armor at the gate. Everyone is stunned. How did this so-called failure even have a 4-star item? Elric prays, it works, and it does. The trap breaks. Panting, Elric slumps down, noticing his robe is destroyed. But then, the gate bursts open, flooding the place with light. Inside, they find mountains of treasure, more than they ever imagined. Among it, Elric discovers parchments, one even calling him Captain. Sean walks up, playfully grabbing him and praising his sharp thinking. Elric admits he just treated it like a test, laying out the spell's formula before mixing it with elemental magic. But suddenly, something about this feels strangely familiar, like he's heard it before. He brushes it off when Sean asks, and Sean reassures him no one will disrespect him or his family again. Still, something feels off. Meanwhile, Liburn receives a dark order through a magical globe. Eliminate Elric. At the same time, Elric is dragged away by strangers, also calling him Captain, and taken toward a lab. Sean laughs, joking that Elric's a big boy now. Then, Liburn approaches Sean, luring him with something shocking, a dragon's corpse hidden behind the treasure. Curious, Sean follows him, believing Elric will join later. At the far end, he finds it an ancient dragon, dead for over 40 years. Meanwhile, Elric is being beaten mercilessly by the ones who dragged him away. Elric cursed himself for lowering his guard. One of the bullies leaned close, his voice cold and sharp, telling him there was no other choice but to take him out. Around them, the rest of the group remained oblivious, their eyes glued to the glittering treasure. Far off, Sean's instincts suddenly flared. He noticed something impossible. The dragon's corpse twitched. At that same moment, Elric tried to cry out for help, only for his captors to gag him. Panic welled inside him, regret gnawing at his heart. After all the trials he had endured, was this really how his story would end, betrayed for trusting the wrong people? The bully raised his magic to strike. But before the blow could land, Sean's voice thundered through the chamber. Move now. Light erupted. The once dead dragon stirred, its skeletal form igniting with ancient fury. Its awakening sent a blazing glow flooding the cavern as it tore free of slumber, chasing after Sean and Liburn. Elric froze, stunned. Trouble after trouble, yet nothing compared to this. The towering beast loomed before him, a skeletal maw opening in a roar that shook the stone around them. Fear rattled his bones, but he forced himself to steady. This was no different than the test he had always faced, and now his test was survival. Then he noticed something odd. The dragon wasn't moving. His mind raced. Was it recharging? Drawing mana? Then realization struck like lightning. The monster was preparing to unleash its breath, not once, but in rapid succession. Elric barked for the others to brace themselves. In unison, Sean and the team summoned their combined shield. The dragon's breath tore against it with such force that fissures spiderwebbed across the barrier. Elric calculated quickly 20 seconds between each blast. If they could hold, they could strike back. If not, they'd be reduced to ash. His eyes flicked toward the exit. 17 seconds to sprint, 3 to close the gate. A slim chance, but still a chance. The barrier finally shattered, fragments of mana scattering like glass. The dragon began drawing in energy for another blast. Wasting no time, Elric shouted for everyone to run. The team bolted. Elric moved with them, certain he could make it past the beast, until agony pierced his back. Out of the shadows, the dragon's guardians emerged, the legendary troopers. Their blades had found him. Sean's voice rang out, desperate, urging Elric to defend himself. Pain ripped through his skull, a blinding headache that drowned out sound. Yet, in that haze, something strange happened. Clarity. His vision sharpened. He could see the troopers' movements before they made them. A strike came. He slipped aside effortlessly. This wasn't an illusion. He wasn't imagining it. He understood now their attacks followed a hidden rhythm, a pattern he could trace. And then the orbs appeared, faint lights marking a path. Was it a trap? Perhaps, but hesitation meant death. Taking the gamble, Elric shouted for everyone to follow him. Without question, they fell in line behind Sean and Elric, sprinting toward the faint hope those glowing orbs promised. As the team sprinted toward the gates, Elric and Sean fought to keep everyone alive, dodging strikes, deflecting blows, and shielding their companions. Freedom was just within reach when, predictably, Liburn, the very definition of deadweight, stumbled and crashed to the ground. He cried out desperately for Elric to save him. For a moment, Elric's gut twisted. Logic screamed to leave him, but his conscience wouldn't allow it. With a grimace, he doubled back, seizing Liburn's hand and dragging him forward. Together, they burst through the threshold. The troopers remained trapped behind the gate, unable to cross its boundary. Relief washed over the group, though Sean's relief was short-lived. "Are you insane?" he snapped, furious. "Risking his life for Liburn of all people?" Elric gave a sheepish chuckle, insisting it wasn't exactly his choice. Sean, however, wasn't laughing. But Elric's thoughts were already elsewhere. The troopers' inability to pass the gate, it didn't feel natural. Someone must have tampered with the dragon's spellwork long before they had arrived. Which meant someone else had been here. That thought barely had time to settle before Elric's eyes widened in shock. He saw something he almost couldn't believe. Then the sound of cracking mana tore through the chamber. The troopers had broken through the barrier after all. With renewed ferocity, they surged forward, cutting off every escape route. Panic spread through the group. They were cornered, trapped. But Elric, ever the strategist, didn't run. Instead, he turned back toward the gate. "Don't!" Sean shouted, reaching for him. Elric only smiled faintly. "I'll catch up." Before anyone could stop him, he slipped inside. The heavy door slammed shut behind him with a thunderous echo. Sean's fists pounded against the sealed gate, his voice hoarse as he shouted Elric's name. Fear clawed at him, fear that Elric was now locked inside, alone, with no way out. 7 years earlier, when Elric's suspension had finally ended, Sean approached him with a smile, extending the offer of friendship. But Elric, cold and distant, brushed him off with a single phrase: "Go away." Sean tried again and again, but each time Elric's response was the same. One day during a class trial, the professor ordered the students to run. Sean surged ahead, covering half the distance with ease, when he realized he should have taken Elric along. But then disaster struck. Sean tripped, skidding to the edge of a cliff. He barely managed to cling on. Instead of helping, his classmates gathered around, mocking him cruelly. Sean's grip weakened. He couldn't use magic either, not without failing the test and disgracing himself before his father. Just as hope slipped away, a hand reached out and caught him. Elric, he hauled Sean back up to safety. Sean, breathless and shaken, told Elric to go on without him. But Elric only reminded him of what he once said. "You wanted to be friends, didn't you?" Sean opened his mouth to thank him, but Elric cut him short. If Sean wanted to repay the favor, he could fetch a few artifacts from his home. That was the beginning. Back in the present, Sean's fist slammed against the sealed gate, panic overtaking him. He swore he would bring his father and the family elders to rescue Elric. But inside, Elric had no intention of dying there. He sprinted toward the dragon, fully aware of what awaited him. Moments later, he emerged clad in armor, his mind sharp and resolute. Life is nothing but quid pro quo, he thought, a constant exchange of sacrifice and reward. From his belt, he pulled free one of his gadgets, usually activated by mana. But Elric had no mana to give. Instead, his life energy flared, blood running from his eyes as he forced the device to respond. This, he believed, was part of the dragon's test. And the key was the spear embedded deep within the creature's body. That spear was the answer, or the executioner. 50-50. Life or death. The troopers rushed him in a tide of steel and fury. Yet Elric only smiled, proud, unflinching. A true Mervinger never backed down. With a roar, he tore the spear free. The cavern quaked. The ground heaved beneath him. His answer was a lie. The weapon had been nothing but a cruel trick. Darkness seemed to bleed into the air. A figure emerged, a man with horns, his presence suffocating. Elric froze as a chill slithered down his spine. The horned stranger stepped forward, each pace heavier than the last, while behind him the dragon howled, its roar trembling not with rage, but with fear. The battle erupted dragon against the horned man. Elric stood frozen, powerless to do anything but watch. The sheer mana radiating from the stranger rivaled that of an eighth circle wizard, perhaps even greater. With a single slash, the horned man ended the dragon's life. Just like that. Elric's eyes widened in disbelief. It wasn't him. It wasn't the team. It wasn't even the test. The dragon had been slain by this man alone. Then, those eyes turned toward him. The horned figure stepped closer, his thoughts twisting darkly. He had finally found a vessel, a body strong enough to free him from the prison he'd endured for centuries. He spoke of burning the world and building a new one, not as a choice, but as a command. This was no ordinary foe. This was Mephistopheles, the legendary Dark Prince. 1,000 years ago, humanity had sealed him away. But now, fate had delivered him Elric Mervinger. Dark energy surged, pouring into Elric's body. His knees buckled as despair closed in. If he had known this wasn't the dragon's trial, but the devil's trap, he never would have come. Mephistopheles laughed, reveling in the torment, even as Shinnick's lingering magic seemed to make Elric's body stronger. But strength meant nothing against despair. Guilt crushed him, memories of his family's sacrifice, of the war that had claimed them, of the betrayal that had left him and his sister abandoned. All he had ever wanted was to cure his illness, restore his family's honor, and make the betrayers regret their sins. For a moment, he was ready to collapse. But then clarity struck. He hadn't even begun to fight. A true Mervinger does not yield to darkness. With blazing resolve, Elric resisted. He forced the Dark Prince's spirit out, his defiance so fierce that even Mephistopheles reeled in shock. Mana exploded from Elric's body, radiant and terrifying. For the first time in centuries, the Dark Prince felt something he thought impossible fear of a human. Elric raised his hand. ready to engulf the corruption as fate intended. And suddenly everything shifted. The cavern, the dragon, the troopers gone. He stood instead in an unfamiliar place. At the edge of a cliff, a cloaked man waited. Elric's heart pounded. The man's voice was the same one that had echoed in his mind all this time. The figure spoke of the past of scholars who sought to push wizardry to its limits. Some had gone too far, surrendering themselves to demons for power, only to bring destruction. In their repentance, they created a family with a single purpose: to fight evil. Yet no matter how hard they tried, they could never banish it completely. Evil was eternal. The cloaked man raised his hand and Elric shouted for him to be careful. Then, in an instant, his eyes snapped open. He was lying in a hospital bed. At the window, Sean stood with his back to him, shoulders trembling. He was crying. A weak laugh escaped Elric. Of all times to wake up, you had to pick now? You look like a sobbing lady. Sean spun around, furious and embarrassed. Elric, still pale, smiled softly. It's okay to cry. Sean wiped his eyes, muttering that he'd gone back and returned with the rescue squad just to save his dumb friend. Elric rubbed his head, reminding Sean that as the heir of a distinguished family, it was inappropriate to call him foolish. Yet Sean, ever stubborn, dismissed the remark and warned him not to repeat his reckless behavior. He then asked Elric to stand for a moment. To their surprise, Elric realized that he had grown taller, his frame more defined and commanding. Sean pointed him toward the mirror, where Elric stared in disbelief at the drastic transformation of his body. Concerned, Sean pressed him about what had happened in the dragon's den and the fate of the beast itself. Elric, however, responded with a teasing smile, refusing to reveal anything for now. Sean felt both frustrated and offended, lamenting how difficult it was to have a best friend who kept such dangerous secrets. Turning the conversation, Elric inquired about the status of the den. Sean explained that his family had sealed it off, ensuring no one entered. By law, the finder of a dragon's den held its ownership, and that title now belonged to Elric. With pride, Sean recounted the immense effort it had taken to keep both the Turium and the Academy from interfering. Elric's smile carried quiet gratitude, recognizing how far Sean had gone to protect him. Yet another thought struck him, Dean Veru. Elric knew that the man's greed and ambition would compel him to covet the excavation rights. Rather than anger, however, a strangely satisfied smile spread across his face, for this was the same man who had once tried to kill him. Sean quickly realized that Elric was scheming something and braced himself for another reckless request. As expected, Elric asked for a favor. Sean initially pretended not to hear, but the request still reached him. Elric wanted news to spread that he remained gravely injured and unconscious. Despite his protests, Sean carried out the plan. Soon, outside the hospital, the official announcement declared Elric's condition critical, forbidding all visitors. Greedy factions desperate for excavation rights attempted to force their way inside, but the Nesta family swiftly secured the hospital, leaving them waiting in frustration. Within the quiet of Elric's room, the spokesman of the Nesta family, Carl Dunas, entered briefly before departing in silence. Once he left, Elric turned his attention inward, addressing the presence lingering within him. He referred to the dark entity as Mephisto, provoking visible offense. Unbothered, Elric casually suggested alternative names, only to be met with further disdain. As he pressed his palm against his chest, a realization emerged. The Dragonheart source of the proto-dragon's absolute power now resided within him. He remembered the moment of chaos when Mephistopheles had attempted to seize his body, and suspicion grew that the event had altered him forever. Conflicted, he sought answers from the very Dark Prince who had once tried to make him a vessel. In the prehistoric age, when dominion belonged to the gods, the Dark Lord commanded 4 princes of calamity: Finis, the Prince of Demise, who ushered death wherever he walked; Insanium, the Prince of Insanity, whose laughter fractured the minds of nations; Phoenicion, the Prince of Fornication, who bent mortals and celestials alike to desire's ruin; and lastly, Picadam Original, the Prince of Original Sin, known to all as Mephistopheles. Of them, he was the greatest, a sovereign of corruption whose schemes once sought to place the world at his feet. Now, that very prince found himself reduced to bickering with a single human. He fumed endlessly, demanding Elric address him properly, acting with the wounded pride of a spurned lover. To Elric, however, his complaints sounded less like fury and more like the tantrums of a spoiled child. With a smirk, he wondered aloud whether all demons were this foolish, or whether this one simply suffered from poor hearing. The Dark Prince's rage deepened. For 10,000 years, he had waited in silence, buried beneath the earth by Xiank, the king of dragons, the one being who thwarted his dominion. Xiank's dying will had sealed them together for eternity, robbing the prince of conquest, glory, and the world that should have been his. A millennium of schemes and patience had led to this one moment, when Elric stumbled into the den and passed every trial designed for his perfect vessel. And yet, at the brink of victory, all his hopes dissolved, his vast mana devoured, his plans undone, and his essence trapped within the very human he sought to enslave. Mephistopheles raged at the injustice, but Elric only reclined lazily, regarding him as nothing more than a melodramatic nuisance. To him, the so-called Dark Prince was little more than a drama queen who delighted in monologues. This dismissive attitude stung more deeply than any blade, and in his bitterness, the prince cursed all inventors as arrogant fools. But Elric's thoughts had already turned inward. The voice that had guided him since childhood, the whisper of destiny, suddenly resonated with clarity. He recalled the very first words it had ever spoken: to engulf the first cup of evil, as intended by fate. Now, with the collar gleaming faintly at his neck, he realized its true purpose. It was no mere ornament, it was a vessel, a tool capable of consuming demonic power. If one cup had already granted him the essence of Mephistopheles, then surely there were second and third cups yet to come. The thought thrilled him. Casting a sidelong glance at the brooding prince, Elric's lips curved into a sly smile. If he could absorb one demon, what was to stop him from taking many more? Elric retreated into the mountains, away from prying eyes. There, he began to meditate, drawing his focus inward until every sound, every pulse of the earth resonated within him. Slowly, the energy built until in a sudden surge, he unleashed a towering blaze of fire that lit the skies crimson. Mephistopheles watched in shock. Dragon fire. It was impossible no human, not even a Minger, could wield the sacred magic of dragons. And yet Elric had done it effortlessly, as though the mana that once cursed him now obeyed his every command. For Elric, it was more than power, it was liberation. The disease of mana circularity, the cruel flaw that had branded him a failure and the shame of the proud Munger line, was gone. In its place surged unbroken streams of energy, potent and unrestrained. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. A quiet resolve settled in his chest. The world that had mocked him, the traitors who had abandoned him, the so-called allies who once belittled him, every one of them would come to regret their scorn. Outside the hospital, the press swarmed the gates, their voices clamoring for answers about Elric's condition, but more importantly, about the excavation rights. Carl Dunas, acting as the Nesta family spokesman, stepped forward and firmly shut them out, announcing that any further information would be handled through the Turium, and that only a written statement would be provided. The moment he turned away from the crowd, however, Carl's composure crumbled. Shaking, he begged Sean never to make him face something like that again, his social anxiety written all over his face. Sean, unfazed, brushed it off, as though Carl's nerves were inconsequential. But Carl wasn't finished. He reminded Sean that if word spread about him handling matters in such a way, both the royal family and the Turium would be furious. Sean waved away his concerns, assuring him that Elric had a plan, and all Carl needed to do was trust in it. That reassurance did little to settle Carl's nerves, especially since he knew something Sean did not, that Elric had already left the hospital on his own, leaving behind only a note promising to return soon. Carl's worst fears deepened when his eyes caught sight of an unopened envelope resting nearby. His hands trembled as he picked it up, suddenly aware of the gravity of the situation. Before either of them could process what it meant, the hospital gates exploded open with a sudden burst of heat and light. Storming inside was Sean's elder sister, Tasha, the Phoenix Witch herself. Her sudden arrival made Sean's heart sink. Known across the Empire as one of the Tristellars, the three prodigies hailed as guiding stars of the contemporary age. Nurtured by the royal family, the Turium and the Soietas Fede, Tasha's presence was nothing short of overwhelming. Her sharp eyes instantly fixed on Carl, and without hesitation, she grabbed him by the ear. Furious, she accused him of failing to deliver her letter to Sean. Carl stammered nervously, apologizing, and explained that his duties had overwhelmed him. Sean, sweating bullets, braced himself as Tasha turned her gaze upon him. She explained that, as a practitioner of medicine, she had heard Elric was injured and had come to assist him. Sean's mind raced in panic. If she walked into that room, she would discover that Elric was nowhere to be found. Desperation clawed at him as he tried to find a way to deflect her. But Tasha was not the type to be easily swayed. She reminded Sean, with an unshakable authority, of exactly who she was. Without wasting time, she cut straight to the matter that truly interested her: the excavation rights to the Dragon's Den. Sean nearly cursed under his breath, suddenly remembering his sister's deep fascination with dragons. He managed to tell her that such matters rested with Elric, and not with him. To his relief, she accepted that explanation, though not without her usual domineering touch. As she turned to leave, she smirked and warned her younger brother that he had been a very bad boy, promising him a punishment later. Sean nearly collapsed under the weight of her words, muttering to himself that he might not survive this ordeal without Elric's return. Carl, pale as ever, admitted he was about to faint as well. Meanwhile, across the Empire, the news of young Minger's supposed unconscious state spread like wildfire. Speculation mounted about the fate of the excavation rights, and greedy eyes lingered on the unopened door of the hospital ward. Elric, far from their reach, read one of the freshly printed newspapers. He smirked, realizing Sean was playing his part perfectly. His attention, however, lingered on a particular image, printed within the pages, a portrait of Dean Veru. A strange smile curved his lips, for he knew precisely what awaited the man who had once tried to end his life. In the office of Variek, the air grew tense as Liebern approached, addressing Veru as minister. But Veru, calm and sharp, corrected him with a cold edge, reminding him that the elections had not yet even begun. Variek plays the sympathetic professor, asking Liebern about Elric. But the truth slips out rumors say Elric is close to death. Variek pretends to care, yet slyly hints that one professor's chair will soon be empty after the election. Seizing the chance, Liebern offers himself up as a replacement. Far away, Elric stands before the forest, using his inner eye to channel mana from the dragon's heart into hidden grains. This allows him to cast magic silently, no incantations required. His first attempts look small, like higher jumps and faster movements, but even that shocks Memphis, the Dark Prince. To him, no beginner should handle double casting and incantation this easily. Elric doesn't stop. He experiments with dragon tongue magic, magic spoken into existence. When he manages to fly, Memphis is stunned. The power resembles the very first Minger, a figure feared even among demons. That's when Memphis realizes, if Elric keeps growing, he might never be able to possess him. Elric knows he still lacks control. He needs a teacher, and ironically, the best one is Memphis himself. He proposes a deal: train him, and he'll use alchemy to craft Memphis a new body. Memphis scoffs and tempts him instead with a darker pact. Become one with me, and I'll teach you everything. Elric isn't having it. Instead, he humiliates Memphis with a silly incantation, transforming the mighty Dark Prince into a chibi version of himself with bunny ears. Memphis rages, but Elric forces him to write down dragon tongue knowledge in a diary, promising to undo the spell only if the notes prove useful. Days pass, and Elric trains alone, ignoring Memphis. Finally, out of sheer boredom, Memphis begins writing lessons, while Elric mocks him by calling him cutie pie. Furious but trapped, Memphis grudgingly becomes Elric's reluctant teacher, while secretly plotting to take over his body before it's too late. Being the Dark Prince, Memphis takes Elric's tricks as an insult to his pride. He refuses to give in, so Elric humiliates him, further transforming him into a dog in a suit. With Memphis subdued, Elric begins reading the basics of dragon tongue magic. The texts are ancient, unlike anything he's ever seen. After absorbing the knowledge, he restores Memphis to human form and demands elaboration on the notes he wrote earlier. To keep control, Elric makes a new rule. Each chapter Memphis writes must be longer than the last. Only then will he earn the right to speak. Furious, Memphis complies but secretly laces the chapters with black magic dark spells designed to devour Elric's body and soul. Yet, days pass, and instead of falling victim, Elric grows stronger just from studying the basics. Memphis panics, unable to understand why his trap has failed. Catching the look on his face, Elric smirks. He confronts him directly. Did Memphis really think he'd start training without first observing everything? The Dark Prince seethes, his carefully hidden spells wasted. Running out of options, Memphis finally mentions his secret charms, the highest form of incantation. Magic so powerful it was once called the voice of God. He taunts Elric, saying he'll never understand it, but Elric realizes this time he isn't lying. Then, Memphis utters a phrase. Magic is perfected on the battlefield. It's an old Mervinger saying. Elric remembers hearing it from his father, who once told him stories of their ancestors, warriors, and scholars who defended their war-torn homeland during the demon invasions. Elric recalls his childhood. His father, weakened by battle scars, often reminisced about fighting alongside Elric's grandfather. Young Elric, full of curiosity, asked if he could one day use the same spells. His father would remind him, "Before force comes knowledge." His grandfather had been a scholar long before he became the strongest wizard. His father told him to follow the guidance of Haisa, while his mother made sure he finished his studies daily. Elric would sometimes rebel, wanting only to play, but Haisi would drag him by the ear back to training. Despite the discipline, they had a small, happy family. But time was cruel. His father sacrificed half his life force to keep Elric's ill mother alive. As their bodies weakened together, his mother reminded her husband she cherished every moment spent with him and their children. Still, Elric's father could no longer sustain her. And so, side by side, both of his parents lay on their deathbeds. Both children wept as their parents' final words lingered. Elric's mother asked Haizid to take care of her little boy, while his father told Elric something that would haunt him forever, that being a wizard didn't matter. What brought him true happiness was simply being their father. With that, both of them slipped away, leaving Haizd and Elric alone in a selfish world. Back in the present, Elric rejects those words. His father was wrong. When you are weak, betrayal comes easily. To survive, Elric must become strong. He repeats the old Mervinger creed. The battlefield is where magic is perfected, and so he resolves to test his strength in real combat. He considers training grounds the haunted Red Forest, but the ghost-like monsters there are too dangerous. The Goblin Caves, but those are overcrowded and well-known. Then he remembers his father once spoke of ancestral sanctuaries scattered across the continent. One of them lies in the frozen north, the Yeti Highland. That is where Elric decides to go. The next day, he bathes in a lake, enchanting the water to alter his appearance. His hair is cut and recolored, his face cleaned and reshaped. By the time he steps out, he looks like a noble straight off the cover of a Vogue magazine. He heads to the Guild Guide, where he's assigned to an adventuring party bound for the Yeti Highland. But to his surprise, they don't look like warriors. Among them are Child, 4 herb collectors, 3 monster hunters, and 5 cloaked strangers, concealing their identities. The Child steps forward with a bright grin, introducing himself as Mingma. He eagerly explains the meaning of his name, then assures the group that everything will be fine if they follow his lead. Already annoyed, Memphis scoffs. while Elric asks about a tele crystal. Mingma admits none exist here. Communication is limited to carrier pigeons and letters. Elric frowns, worried about how he'll contact his sister, but leaves it to Sean to figure something out. As their journey begins, Mingma chatters endlessly, as if he's paid to talk. Before long, they reach the snow-covered Yeti Highland. Memphis stiffens. He recognizes this place. When Elric asks if Yetis are related to demons, Memphis snaps, insulted by the comparison. Yet he admits one thing. The former king of the Yetis met a cruel fate. Had he lived, he might have been blessed by the Dark Lord himself. Memphis wonders aloud if the tomb of that king still remains, hidden beneath the ice. Elric's curiosity grew, but Memphis coldly remarked that if the Yeti King's tomb still existed, it had probably been looted long ago. Yet something stirred in Elric. The tomb. It could be linked to his family's bloodline. His father once told him that the Minger sanctuaries were not just refuges, but monuments built to preserve their legacy. He had even urged Elric to one day visit the Highlands, uncover that legacy, and pay respects to their ancestors. Now, standing in the snow, Elric couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment his father had prepared him for. He looked down at the strange collar around his neck, silently questioning if it held hidden answers. Meanwhile, Mingma launched into another tale, this time, a chilling myth of his tribe. He spoke of a woman betrayed by her husband, abandoned in the snowy wilderness. She died, but not permanently. Elric leaned in, but Memphis snapped, demanding Elric cast a spell to shut the chatterbox up. Something felt wrong. Elric scanned their surroundings. Not a single snow person in sight. Mingma then declared they would soon enter the hardest part of the path after crossing the hill, and the group decided to rest. As Elric observed the adventurers, he realized they weren't simple travelers. Their movements, their posture, they resembled knights in service to a noble house, and one cloaked figure among them commanded quiet authority. When the cloak fell, it revealed a young woman. Immediately, tension broke out. Some men began to harass her, only for Chen, one of the knights, to step in, defending her honor. His blade gleamed as rage burned in his eyes, but the lady herself screamed, ordering him to lower it. Reluctantly, he obeyed. Elric and Memphis exchanged glances, watching the scene unfold. But before order could return, a chilling shout pierced the air. Run! Chaos erupted. The ground trembled as shadows loomed from the snowbanks. A massive pack of Yetis launched a sudden ambush. Roars shook the valley as the beasts tore into the group. Panic spread instantly. Chen's voice cut through the fear. Protect the lady at all costs. Elric's instincts flared. With swift incantations, he cast a shimmering magic barrier, shielding the group and guiding their movements. Yet it wasn't enough. Men were being torn down one after another. For Memphis, the carnage was entertaining. He smirked at the humans' suffering, whispering cruel commentary into Elric's ear. But this was Elric's first true battle, his first trial by fire. Wanting to focus, he silenced Memphis with a binding incantation. And then, exhilaration washed over him. This was real combat. This was where magic was sharpened. He watched as Chen unleashed his knightly aura, his blade slicing through Yetis like a storm, determined to protect the noble lady. For Elric, fear was replaced with resolve. He had promised himself he would no longer be weak. And here, surrounded by blood, ice, and death, his true practice had begun. Elric wished he could stay back and observe longer, but the invasion was escalating fast. If the snow people broke through, more would almost certainly follow. This was no time to hesitate. With a deep breath, Elric dropped his disguise and summoned his armor, the spell he had stored using Memorize. The sudden transformation drew startled looks. Even from the Yetis, they faltered, uncertain at the sight of him. But hesitation didn't last. The beasts charged. Elric gritted his teeth. He wasn't sure if his attack spells would truly harm them, but he had to slow them down. He lunged into the fray, casting a flurry of incantations. Explode, burn, penetrate. Each strike tore through the Yetis. His blade and spells danced together, leaving a trail of charred and broken bodies. When the snow settled, Only 2 Yetis remained, attempting to slink away into the blizzard. Not a chance. Elric cast Bind, snapping chains of magic around them. Both collapsed, snarling helplessly. He killed one, but left the other alive, panting, exhilarated from the battle. Mounting the captured Yeti's back, he summoned Memphis. Only then did he remember he'd sealed the demon's mouth earlier. The furious, muffled growls reminded him of that mistake. Elric chuckled, released the incantation, and Memphis erupted with complaints. Ignoring him, Elric turned to the bound Yeti and made his offer. "Tell me where your village is, and I'll let you live." Memphis translated, and the Yeti responded slyly, demanding his freedom in exchange for the information. Elric hesitated, but Memphis urged him, saying negotiation through words was smarter. Against his instincts, Elric snapped his fingers and released the binding. The Yeti's lips curled into a cruel grin. Memphis had betrayed him, whispering to the creature to attack Elric together. But before the Yeti could strike, Elric's reflexes blazed. With another flick of his hand, he cast Bind again, shackling the beast mid-lunge. Silence fell. Now both the Yeti and Memphis stared at him in uneasy fear. For once, Elric commanded the ground. The Yeti relented. Bowing his head, he agreed to show Elric the way. Elric shot Memphis a cold reminder. "Don't forget, you once slaughtered these people without mercy." The words lingered like frost. But then, Elric's chest tightened. His thoughts drifted inward to the power burning inside him. The ancient proto-dragon's might, Memphis's infernal essence, both sealed within his heart. And yet, he was only wielding 3%. Any more, and his body would collapse. His very life would tear apart. The thrill of combat, the fear of death, it all weighed on him. But one truth anchored him. He could not give up. Not until his family's name was restored. He thought of the noble lady. Was she safe? Elsewhere, Chen and the knights had barely held their ground. The lady noticed someone missing from her guard. Chen tried to reassure her, perhaps the man had fled or hidden, but worry clouded her eyes. And in the icy silence that followed, Elric knew this battle was only the beginning. Back to the young Minger. Elric finally reached the village of the Snow People. He demanded to be led to their leader, and the Yetis, though wary, parted to allow their chieftain forward. The towering figure, cloaked in furs and age-old authority, studied Elric with piercing eyes. Though fear gripped him, Elric remained steady beneath his cloak, ready to strike first if things turned hostile. The leader's gaze lingered on Elric's green eyes. "Tell me your name, boy," he rumbled. "Elric Mervinger," came the reply. A flicker of recognition crossed the Yeti's weathered face. Instead of hostility, he turned and beckoned Elric to follow. As they walked, the leader spoke of a legend carried down through his tribe. Ages ago, our mountains were ruled by a mighty king, and at his side, a human. He was no ordinary man, but a trusted friend. His eyes shone green like yours. His name was Minger. Elric's breath caught. His ancestor, bound by blood and destiny, had once stood beside the Snow King. The Yeti continued. "For generations, our leaders have watched over the human's dwelling, preserving it, protecting it." "Where?" Elric pressed, heart pounding. The leader raised his arm, pointing deep into the jagged cliffs. Elric squinted, focusing until he could see it half hidden, a dwelling carved into the abyss. "We go there only once a year," the Yeti added gravely, "when the winds are silent." Before Elric could ask more, Memphis scoffed. "You'll need more than guts to descend that cliff. Without a powerful spell, the winds will shred you alive." But Elric only grinned. "If death waits below, then I'll greet it smiling." With that, he leapt. "Lunatic," Memphis cursed, diving after him. The winds were far stronger than Elric anticipated. They howled like living beasts, clawing at his body. His heart thundered, and for a moment, he teetered on the edge of death. But Memphis, uncharacteristically worried, shouted, "Concentrate, focus, or you're finished." So Elric drew upon his will. One step, another, he bent the wind beneath his feet. bounding downward, as though walking on invisible stones. By the time he touched the frozen ground, his breath was ragged, but his grin remained. "That's how I work," he muttered, collapsing into a seated rest. The house loomed before him. Its doors pulsed faintly with ancient magic. He approached, tried words of power, Dark Prince, Minger, Demon Hunter, Yeti, but nothing stirred. Then his fingers brushed the collar at his throat. Almost instinctively, he raised it toward the door. A resonance trembled in the air, and with a heavy groan, the lock yielded. Inside, Elric found not ruins, but grandeur. The place was vast, preserved as though time itself had respected its walls. Shelves upon shelves of tomes lined the halls. His hand drifted to one, fundamental principles of wizardry. Knowledge, real, powerful knowledge, waited here. Meanwhile, Memphis wandered the chamber, his expression unreadable. But then, he muttered, almost to himself. This was the residence of the Winter Sage. Elric's head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing," Memphis dismissed quickly. Too quickly. But Elric's mind raced. His ancestors' bond with the Snow King, this hidden house, and now the name of the Winter Sage. And then, as though fate itself guided his hand, his eyes fell upon another book, its spine heavy with age, its title carved deep, The History of the Mingers. Elric flipped open the book, his eyes narrowing as he traced the words etched in old ink. It declared that the sole duty of the Minger bloodline was to destroy evil in its path. The words echoed what he had once heard in his dream. Reading further, he discovered that this mission had been bestowed upon his family by fate itself, a burden and a legacy both. The text spoke in strange metaphors: to eat, to swallow, to drink. It urged the Mingers to feast on evil, consume it until they were full, and then transform it into something meaningful. As the words settled in his mind, a sudden pulse ran through him. His collar glowed fiercely, sparks crackling along its edges. A deep, resonant voice filled the room. "Young Minger, you have passed the test of the grand collar of wizardry. You have swallowed your first cup of evil. Now, the next path shall begin." Before Elric could react, the world around him shattered. He blinked, and when his eyes opened, he was no longer in the house. He stood in a strange, desolate realm, silence pressing down on him like a weight. From the distance, footsteps echoed. A man approached, tall, commanding, cloaked in an aura of profound power. His eyes glimmered with recognition. "You must be the young blood from the future," the man said, "the one who came to inherit our duty." Elric rose to his feet, tense but unyielding. The man introduced himself. "I am Ottohan Mervinger, one of the 5 great ancestors of our line, and the first to systematize the Mervinger magic." Elric's breath caught. "Are you the Winter Sage?" Ottohan tilted his head in surprise. "How would you know that?" Elric muttered, "Mephisto told me." But suddenly, his heart sank. Memphis was gone. He was truly alone here. Ottohan studied him carefully. "So, the first cup of evil you swallowed was the Dark Prince. Interesting. My descendants have exceeded my expectations." His voice carried a note of pride. Meanwhile, in the Mervinger house, Memphis sat restlessly, waiting, oblivious to the trials unfolding beyond reach. Elric pressed forward. "What did you mean when you said fate?" Ottohan placed a firm hand upon his head. "You must be filled with questions. Why do we pass knowledge in this way instead of teaching directly? It is because our family's magic is like a cartwheel once set in motion. It cannot be stopped. If it were to fall into the wrong hands, all would be lost. That is why we test our heirs, even if it takes generations. And now, you, Elric, hold the choice. Will you stop the wheel or let it roll forward?" Elric's heart pounded. He didn't understand everything, but one thing was clear. He would not back down. "I will carry it forward. I will restore my family's honor. I will complete the will of my grandfather and ancestors. and I will become the greatest wizard this empire has ever known. Ottohan smiled faintly, seeing the fire in his descendant's eyes. He let a ball of magic form in his palm. With a flick, it burst into a blazing flame, lighting the path ahead. Then let your ambition guide you, Ottohan declared. He led Elric through howling winds into the frozen wilderness. The cold bit at Elric's skin, yet the challenge only widened his grin. Ottohan watched him, impressed. Yes, the ambition of a Troomvinger. Finally, Ottohan stopped and pointed toward a void of darkness within the mountains. Elric squinted, focusing, and there, bound in the abyss, was a figure radiating dread. That, Ottohan's voice rumbled, is the Mountain King, the only man who once ruled these peaks. Elric's body ached from the backlash of his own magic, his chest heaving as the Snow King's guards loomed closer, their blades glinting in the pale light of the frozen mountains. For the first time, doubt gnawed at him. Was this trial meant to test his strength or to break his will? Ottohan's last reminder echoed in his head. You are not here to defeat the demon. You are here to devour it. At that moment, Elric realized he had been treating this like a normal battle. He had been striking, defending, and pushing forward with brute force, like every other fight he had survived. But this wasn't just a fight. It was a trial of his essence, a confrontation with the root of evil itself. The guards of the Mountain King tightened their circle, their growls resonating like a chorus of primal rage. These were not mere warriors. Each was an echo of the Mountain King's corrupted will. Their swings were heavier, their movements sharper, and their hunger for his life undeniable. When they lunged, Elric barely managed to roll aside, his breath frosting in the air. His arm burned where the seal of the Dark Prince was embedded. He could feel Mesto's whispers within it, promises of overwhelming power, urging him to unleash it all. Let me out, boy, the voice teased, and we shall paint these mountains in their own blood.